Hello, everybody out there. Today's question we're going to be diving into is what happens to the family home in a divorce? So if you're ready for episode 178, well then let's get started.
Hey, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are
Looking
you?
beautiful as always. Well, you are. And then look at the weather we have. It's a gorgeous day. What else is going on?
Well, I think this episode came after Valentine's Day.
Yes, it did.
So I hope for all of you that are in the middle of divorce or relationship issues, Valentine's Day to me is about loving yourself and loving, it's about love, right? Love of family, love of friendships, love of self. It's not just about love.
Romantic love, no.
So anyhow, I just wanted to put that little plug out there.
And I've never been really one to celebrate love one day a year. I believe you should celebrate love every day. I mean, when
you just don't want to go buy a present.
No, I want to buy you a present every day of the year.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have a present every day of the year.
There you go.
Anyhow,
But I don't think love should be about presents either. It's more about feelings and emotions and the way you treat somebody.
Of course, honey.
But you can get me a present.
Nice.
You can get me a present then.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyhow, enough of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about who gets the house, what happens to the house,
Okay.
the marital home, and a divorce.
Well, let's first talk about, because I know that there's reasons why you have to sell your home in a divorce,
Right.
or maybe there might be some cases where you don't have to sell the home. So can you give me an example of why you
No.
might have to sell your home?
No,
No,
because
why?
first I want to talk about you.
Ooh.
Who?
I
No,
feel-
seriously. No, I want to talk about you
Okay.
as well, because of course, as a divorce attorney, I've dealt with the sale of homes. Who's going to get the house, arguments about that.
Right.
Partitioning, which means selling the home and what that looks like. That's easy to talk about, and we will. But I also wanted to talk about it from your perspective. I don't know that everybody knows that in addition to being probably the most amazing life coach for people going through
No bias there, right?
before, after, and during divorce,
Yes,
right?
thank you.
And coaching people at Life After Divorce Coaching.
Mhm.
You also are in real estate.
Yes.
Who are you with again?
I am a agent with Douglas Elliman in Boca Raton, Delray Beach area. Yeah.
But I think what's also interesting for our listeners to know is that you have been appointed as an expert by the courts here in Palm Beach County as a realtor in divorce.
Yes.
Do you remember what it was about? I don't want to give out, I mean, this is all public record, but do you remember the couple of the cases that you were deemed an expert?
Yes. Well, I'm not going to say any names, of course, but it was basically an expert on valuating the home and what it could sell for.
Right, listing it,
What
the terms of sale should be,
Right.
what the marketplace is like, what it should be listed for, what it looks like as far as getting the home ready, what the issues were that you contemplated as a realtor. I remember because I was the lawyer on the case.
Yes.
Yes. But anyhow, but you've also been, which is so interesting to me, in some of our cases, the other lawyers have wanted you to be the realtor appointed,
Mhm.
even though you are my husband, and
Right.
I was representing one side, to sell the house.
Well, what makes it very interesting to me is putting that aside, that I'm your husband.
Yeah,
It's very important that you have to stay neutral.
right.
And I think that if you're good at that and you put that feeling of neutrality out there, the other attorney won't be so intimidated or feel that you have not a cause, but what's the word?
I don't
know. You have an underlying reason that you want to get the case. So the neutrality and the unemotions that play into it are very, very important when it comes to the other side. That makes sense?
You always crack me up.
Okay.
Okay, because let's just say it the way it is.
Say
It's
what it-
unusual for the other lawyer to say to his client, hey, by the way, I think that Jeff Wilson the other side's lawyer, Doreen's
Husband.
Doreen's husband should be appointed and agreed to sell the house.
No, that is strange.
But they've done it because I think that they know that you have, this is why I think so. First of
Okay.
all, you've been appointed as an expert by the court, which says a lot to most
Okay.
lawyers, right? That you can be neutral, that you can work with both parties trying to sell their home and really have an open mind. But I think also they know you're a life coach and they know that you can deal with people that are emotional.
Right.
When they're going through a divorce, you know what that looks like, you know what the mindset is, you know how to do the thought work, and you can keep people focused on the business of getting their house sold and not the emotional part.
Yes.
And I think that's why. But anyhow, and you've done a great job.
Thank
You've
you.
done a great job. I mean, in one of our cases, I think you sold, were there 3 or 4 different properties and you got them sold very quickly and for great dollars. And then recently you had one sold in less than a few days.
Yeah, well, yeah. it
Well,
was
we'll see, right? It still
Yes.
hasn't closed. But anyhow, the point being that, let's talk about selling the house. Let's talk about what happens to the house. You know, in Florida, and again, I always premise this by Florida versus wherever our listeners are getting divorced. You have to talk to the lawyers and look at the laws in that state. But in Florida, they look at various things. So some of the things that they look at, if you want to go through, there's about 4 things that I think are really important. There's a couple things more than that, but let's talk about the main things.
the main 3.
So the main thing is who gets the house in the divorce, right? Because
Right.
people sometimes fight about this. Many times the house they agree it needs to get sold or the court sells it because why?
Well, one reason could be that one person cannot afford the house.
Correct. But usually they'll sell it because it is in many cases, many divorces, the largest equity asset.
Right.
And people need the money, right?
Mhm.
So they need to sell it to divide the equity so they can move forward and buy individual homes or have money to rent or whatever they want to do. Also, it's not affordable, like you said, by one of the parties
Right.
to get it themselves and be able to maintain it. And the other thing is, most of the times, many times, it's titled in joint names. The mortgage and note is in joint names. So you either have to refinance it to get the other person off or sell it, you know, because nobody wants to be on a house that they're tied to a note that their spouse gets,
Right.
okay? But there are things that the courts in Florida do look at that might require that. So let's talk about what happens if the parties don't agree to sell the house, right?
Right. What happens?
What happens? So who gets the house,
Who
right?
gets the house?
Who gets the house? So some of the things are the marital contributions, right? In other words, the court evaluates the contributions made by each party as to the improvements and the maintenance of the home.
Mhm.
Who was really the person involved, right?
Right.
Who paid for it? Who was the one, if you refurbished it, all the things like this. Any questions on that one?
No, I got that.
Okay, economic circumstances,
Right.
right? The financial situation of the parties, who can afford it, what are their incomes, their employability, the expenses of the home. That's a relevant factor.
Yeah, because even if you get bought out, let's say, and you have that side of the house, are you able to maintain it?
Right.
You know,
Many times it takes both parties' incomes,
Sure.
right? The other thing is child custody issues.
Mm.
Is it in the best interest of the children, for the house to remain intact, at least by one of the parents? And in Florida, it could be for a period of time during their minority, and then they could order the house to be sold. So they're looking at the best interest of the children. They want to prioritize that in many cases. So again, they're looking at the contribution to the home, the economic circumstances, is it affordable, child custody issues, and then non-marital assets. Is it a premarital asset of one of the parties? So for example, do they own the home prior to the marriage? And then, you know, the parties, it became the marital residence,
right.
right? So if I own the home, for example, prior to the marriage, but now it's a marital home, the court might say, oh, that's one of the factors, maybe we want you to keep that home. Had it before you got married, you should keep it. But they're still gonna look at all the factors.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I remember one case where one of the spouse got the home and wanted to refinance it, like we said, but she couldn't qualify by herself.
Right,
So even though she had a great settlement, they bought her out, had
Right.
money, but she couldn't qualify to refinance it by herself.
Yeah, I mean, I have some cases, or I've had some cases in the past where the factors that the court looks at for the purposes of my client's desire to keep the house, you know, he fit all the factors. It was premarital home. He had placed it in joint names, so that was something that had to happen. But he owned it prior to the marriage, and he had purchased it a while before they got married. You know, he'd done a lot of improvements to the home before they got married. He put it in joint names, so it became a marital asset during the marriage. The child, the school district literally was across the street, and so they could walk the child to school. So that was a big factor. The other factor that we had in our favor was that his parents lived in the same community.
Wow.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? So literally lived just around the corner. So that was nice, and that was one of the factors. He could afford it moving forward, made a lot of money, and he was able to buy her out. The other factor in that case is that there was no mortgage on it. So it wasn't like there was a mortgage in joint names. And there were plenty of assets to be able to pay the wife out for her share of the equity in the home. So it just made total sense.
It did make sense.
And the wife agreed. It was not an issue, right? But that's not usually the case. Usually you don't find factors so beautiful like that.
Right. What do they do? Just a quick claim deed?
Yeah, generally. Usually it's a quick claim deed, and you know, it's not an incident. It's an incident, meaning an exchange of property for the purposes of the divorce, so there's no tax consequences and things like this. But pretty simple to do. You just sign that quick claim deed, usually at the time that you sign the settlement agreement, right? So it's pretty simple. And it's nice if one person can keep the home, especially if there's a child, one less thing that the child has to be uprooted about, right? So it's a beautiful thing. But unfortunately, in many cases, it is a big asset. There's a lot of equity in it. It needs to be sold. It's unaffordable. So the court looks at the factors. So from a realtor standpoint, because I know you've dealt with this, what do you recommend to parties? Somebody's going through a divorce and they've agreed to sell the home. Okay, they know that they have to. But they're maybe struggling about who should sell it, who's a realtor.
Well, it's not easy finding a good realtor, whether you're going through a divorce or not going through a divorce. But when you are, it's very important that you find somebody that's neutral, that's not your best friend or a cousin or
Distant cousin.
Distant relations, and especially that knows. I think it's a benefit to me to be a life coach because I can benefit by being unemotional when the time comes, not to have emotions play into the part of it.
Well, I think you can, let's clarify. I think you can help people get away from the emotion to the business of selling the house because of your training as a coach, right?
Right.
You know how to talk to them, hopefully, and because I know that it can be a very, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I've heard you dealing with two different parties, trying to get the house sold, where an offer comes in, and you're talking to one side, then you're talking to the other side, and you're this go-between because they're not talking.
Well, we have a saying in coaching called "Don't get into the pool," and it's very important that when one side is talking about their spouse, that it's kind of bouncing off of you like a rubber ball, and
you're not saying, "Oh yeah, I agree."
And especially not just saying that you agree, but when you actually are in front of the other person, you have that open door to your mind that they may be the greatest person to you, and you get along great with them, but just not the ex-wife or the ex-husband. So it's natural that they don't get along with each other. But I can get along with them because I am neutral. And it's very important that when you're looking for a real estate agent, that maybe try to find somebody that has experience. Try to find a referral for somebody that has experience with divorces. Yeah,
in other words, has experience selling real estate of people going through divorce.
Yeah, not that they've been through their own divorce.
That might be helpful too, though.
Yeah, right.
Especially if they have to sell the house, but
that may help. But somebody that has dealt with selling homes in divorce, that knows the in and outs of the courts.
It's a different animal. right?
It is. It's
It is different.
It is.
Not every realtor, I'm sure, wants to put up with that because it is more challenging, right? It is.
It is.
It is more challenging. I know you're up for the task, but yeah, so let's see. So we had find somebody who is not a friend or a relative.
Right.
Because you have to agree as to who the realtor is going to be. And if not, at least in Florida typically, then the court's going to tell you who the realtor is
Well,
going to be.
I think the bottom line should be finding the best price for the house in the quickest amount of time. And if you're looking to achieve those two goals, then you can remain neutral.
Right. Yeah, but you took me off what I was saying. You know that, right?
I did.
Yeah.
I do
That's
that a
okay.
lot. Sorry about that.
I was just recapping.
We are married. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. We're not selling our house though.
No, we're not.
And if we do, I'll get it. Just kidding. Just kidding. But no, just kidding. But maybe. Anyhow, so no, I was just recapping. I was just saying that you want to find someone who's neutral,
Right.
who's not a friend, that knows the area, maybe most likely has experience selling homes of people going through divorce,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And is going to be focused on the best price in the shortest period of time,
Exactly.
right?
You got yourself a realtor.
Yes. Now let me explain one other thing that I think is important about dealing with sales of homes and divorces. When you enter into your settlement agreement, the terms of how you're going to sell the house, usually there's something called, well, I like to call it a confidential side agreement. So your marital settlement agreement might say something under the marital home that it's going to be sold. And then it'll refer to a confidential side agreement that specifies the terms of sale. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we have a confidential side agreement as to the sale of the marital residence, as opposed to putting all that into a marital settlement agreement that's part of a public court record?
Well, there's two reasons.
Okay.
I think, well, that I can think of, there may be more. But when you're negotiating with another side, another realtor, that has to be confidential. That can't be privy to the other eyes.
What do you mean?
In other words, if you're saying, well, after a certain period of time, we have to lower it 10%.
Right. In other words, you don't want the world to see what you're willing to accept.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And most of the times in these confidential side agreements to sell the house, we'll have a listing price, we'll have who the realtor is, we'll have step downs in that listing price over certain periods of time, like let's say after 60 days it'll go down 2%, etc.
Mm-hmm.
We usually have things like we'll accept certain terms, including 95% of that then listing price, just as an example.
Right.
You know, things like this that you wouldn't want the world to know because you want to get the best price.
Right. Well, also the benefit of that is it cuts out future emotions.
True.
So if
true.
I'm in negotiations with somebody and I'm getting them a better price than we have to go down to,
Right.
it's cutting out their emotions in the future.
Who's there?
The parties. In other words, if they want to accept the price and the other side doesn't want to accept the price and they're getting into a heated battle over it, but it's in the side agreement, we don't have to deal with those emotions.
Well, it sets the understandings
Right.
as to what will be a listing price, an acceptable sales price, maybe even the terms of sale. Like sometimes we put in even what the terms might look like,
Exactly.
you know, for example. So I think it's
So it's like a
great.
preemptive strike over their emotions.
It's smart.
Yeah.
You know, I talked last time about settlement agreements
Mm-hmm.
and how they're not always easier, meaning easier than going to trial, but they're certainly better. Listen to that episode if you didn't and you wanted to learn more. But negotiating the terms of this confidential side agreement to sell the house takes time, because you really have to think about and do your research. What should the sales price be? What would be acceptable drop downs in that listing price? What's a good accepted price? I mean, you're doing a lot of work in advance, so that takes time. And your lawyer can work with the realtor. Sometimes we work with our own realtor, not the one that's been appointed or agreed to by the court or by the parties. Just trying to get an understanding as to what we think is a good sales price.
Like a
and all
secret
that.
second opinion.
Yeah. We also do, what's a CMA?
It's a comparative market analysis.
And could you explain to people why that might be important if you're going through a divorce to get one of those? And how do you get one? So why is it important to get it?
Okay.
And how do you get it?
How do you get it, or how do you
Oh.
accomplish getting it? How do you come to the CMA terms?
No, what is it?
Okay. Well,
From
what
the
you're doing
pers-
is you're taking the solds and the for sales in the area and getting an overall look at the market and see what has been sold recently, because that's going to give you an idea of what you could probably sell your house for.
Right,
And then you get also an idea of your competition, as in what's for sale.
right,
Because anybody can say, I want this much for my house, and they'll never sell it.
right,
Yeah,
right.
so-
We see that often.
So a CMA is kind of a reality check.
And what's the abbreviations for again?
Comparative, so you're comparing the area, comparing the houses, comparing the neighborhoods.
Right.
And you're also comparing the, what's going on in the house, how many bedrooms.
Okay. What,
A market
right,
analysis.
perfect, a
Yeah.
CMA.
CMA.
And how does someone get that?
You give me a call.
No, but you're here in Boca Raton, Florida,
Right.
and Delray and the surrounding areas, Boynton Beach and all the
Right.
things. But
Your
but
your
for the-
realtor should be able to get you a CMA pretty easily and pretty quickly.
I think what I was trying to get at is most realtors, if you're going through a divorce and you have a realtor, you probably are receiving brochures in the mail. You know who the competitive realtors are in your community. You can ask them for a CMA.
Absolutely.
They'll give it to you for free, right? It doesn't cost
Absolutely.
anything. I think it's a great idea if you're going through a divorce, get it anyhow. See what you think the value of the house is and what they think it's going to list for, right?
That's a great idea.
Right? And it doesn't cost anything. Now, should you tell the realtor that you're going through a divorce? This
No,
is
definitely. I wouldn't tell them that
why
because,
would you? Yeah, why?
well, it seems that you're, well, if you're put in the position where your realtor knows that you have to sell it, then they may be able to sell it at a lower price.
True, and you don't want to do that.
don't wanna do
You want
that.
to get the most you can.
Right. And you
It's
don't.
really none of their business.
It's none of their business.
Yeah.
None of their business. I mean, I like to know it because I'm dealing with two different people that are going through the emotionals, going through the separations. But that's why you have to find somebody that remains neutral. Because
Yeah.
in the sale part of it, the divorce has nothing to do with it. Except
Right.
except for that little side agreement that you
That
have.
confidential side
The confidential that, like I said, has nothing to do with it. We don't know about that.
Right. As a matter of fact, in many of the cases, we're not permitted as lawyers or the clients to even show it to anybody. The confidential side agreement. Sometimes we're not even permitted to show it to the realtor.
Okay.
Okay, because we don't want the realtor to have knowledge, as you said, that the parties have agreed that they'll accept this price. Well, we want the realtor to get the best price. And if they know that they're willing to accept this, I think just human nature, that might not be such a great thing. What do you think? For most.
If they have scruples and they're definitely want to get the best price, I think that it's important that they do see that, because if in a certain amount of time.
You think they should see
Well,
it?
in a certain amount of time, if you're supposed to say lower the price 10%, they have to know it, because they have to lower the price 10% in a certain period of time.
Right.
But as far as the bottom line, I think in that side agreement, it also says that even though the bottom line number is this, they could accept higher and they could accept lower.
Yeah, but I was trying to get to the point of not showing the realtor the side agreement. In most of my cases that I've dealt with the confidential listing side agreement, we have in that agreement that it is not to be shown to anyone except for enforcement purposes, meaning, for example, you can tell your realtor that the price is supposed to go down.
Right.
Okay, you don't have to show them the agreement to do that. But let's say we don't lower the price you could show the court the side agreement for enforcement purposes, right?
Right.
Oh, the other side won't agree to sign the new price, because it does take both parties to sign a listing contract.
Absolutely.
Right?
And a purchase contract too.
Right, and to agree to lower the price.
Absolutely.
Okay. If the house is in joint names.
Yeah, I don't think it's
Right,
necessary,
what-
right, if it's in both names, but I don't think it's necessary to show the side agreement to the agent if he has the intention on selling it for the highest price. You're right.
Absolutely.
I agree with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, what else? With regard to the house. What about just some tips from a realtor's perspective, getting your house ready
Okay.
for sale? Just a couple quick tips.
Well, I do recommend.
Especially going through a divorce, because you know things are probably going to be a little convoluted and disarray.
Well, one way that we could take the emotions out of it is to have a pre-listing inspection.
Oh, yes.
So get the house inspected so you're knowing what you're dealing with.
Right, because don't, in most purchased and sale contracts, isn't there an inspection period?
Yes,
And don't they usually hire an expert to come in and do an inspection?
exactly.
And this is where, is it not, because again, this is not my field, this is where you're an expert and I am not. They come in and they check like the electrical and the
air
roof and the
conditioning,
structure
all that.
and all the things.
Everything, yes.
Okay.
And if you're on the water, the seawall and
Right, and all
the
that.
dockage.
And I would assume, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that most of the time, something is gonna come back as needing to be repaired.
Right.
Have you ever had an inspection in which they didn't need to, maybe a new house or something?
Not in my life.
Really?
Not in my experience. I've never had, except that if it's a new construction,
Right.
possibly.
And even then, I think there's a punch list.
Exactly.
Right?
And you know what? I think even the house that we live in, you
Yeah.
and I live in.
Yeah.
You know,
We
we
would
live
have
in it. We
things.
live in it every day.
Yep, things happen.
There's going to be things that they're going to
Yeah,
find.
wear and tear.
They're being paid to find something.
Oh, right, true.
In other words, the buyer is hiring the inspector.
Okay, so they
So you can
have
imagine
it
spending
sent-
$800 on an inspection
Yeah,
and saying, I didn't find anything.
yeah, right.
I'd be a little pissed.
Yeah, because there's probably something in every single house.
And there is, and the inspector has to follow the same rules that every other person with a license has to follow. However, there's pretty much there's going to be something that they find.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea if anybody sells a house to have that inspection done, but if you're going through a divorce, the parties would have to agree to that, because usually they would split the expense, or someone would get a credit back if they fronted the dollars for this $800 or whatever it costs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, I will keep that in mind with my houses, in my divorces. Maybe I haven't thought about that, so thank you. That inspection maybe can be part of that side confidential agreement.
I
Let's get
appreciate
an
it.
inspection
Yes.
done, right?
Yes.
Alrighty,
Well, until then, we will see you next week.
absolutely. If you have any more questions, give us a call.
Give us a call.
Talk to you then.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't forget to follow us on social media for more empowering content, tips, and inspiration to help you thrive after divorce. And if you're ready to take the next step in your journey, don't miss out on our free 30-minute coaching session. It's a great opportunity to get personalized guidance and support for wherever you are in your divorce journey. Just visit the link in our description to book your appointment.